Welcome back to the Aussie Shed, ladies and gentlemen, for another episode of Project Fairlady. So I'm once again trying to take care of some of the bigger bodywork stuff just before we get the car to a stage of, kind of doing final rub downs and, guide coating and rubbing down and taking care of, all of the sort of minor stuff before we start getting serious about the overall finish on the vehicle. So we'll just go down here, and what I'm working on there is the left-hand side front guard, or guards is probably the proper way to refer to it. So this is actually made up of two front guards. So the back section here, it was my original front guard, which my guards, like everything else on the car, completely rust-free. Fantastic, but up this end of the front guard, when I was mucking around fitting up this front bar that I got, the fit up was really terrible with that section of the guard there. So just like when I started on the sill, I did a bit of an exploratory on this and started trying to figure out why it wouldn't fit the bar properly, and it turned out that it had actually had a bit of a tap, probably a parking lot or something like that, a low speed thing, and this was all dented and crinkled in up here. It had been beaten back out, but it was still pretty rough, and there was a ton of body filler in it. So what I did initially is I ground out all the body filler. I then started panel beating on it, and I got it a lot better. I got it a hell of a lot better, but the problem with it was, like, it just turned into, a really major issue to get it to align properly with the front bumper bar, and it just wasn't something I was prepared to deal with any longer. So I started looking around to get hold of another front guard. And the problem that I discovered was it's very hard to get hold of really good condition second-hand front guards. A lot of the time, even though they appear to be okay, they're like this. They've had accident damage and they've got body filler in them. Really, if you can get the guard off and turn over and have a look at the back side of it, you can sort of see remnants of repairs and stuff. You can see hammer marks and things like that. So yeah, I was left in a bit of a predicament. Well, what am I going to do? So I ended up finding another guard, which was this guy here. But the problem with it was, which what I found with a lot of them, the bottom of it was really, really rusty, and there was also a bit of a rust hole up here in it. But this end up here, which is the area that I was concerned about, was actually perfect, as you can see here. No sign of any previous damage and no rust at all up this end. So I made the decision that I was going to make one guard out of two, for obvious reasons, because as you can see, what I have here now is a completely rust-free, perfect condition left-hand front guard. So how I went about this was I had my original guard bolted onto the car, and I cut it long, about here. I worked out where I wanted to do the join. I've done the join at the top of the wheel arch there, and sort of in between two bolt fixings where it bolts down onto the frame of the vehicle there. And then went about cutting this section of this guard off, left it long as well, got them both on the car, sat this one over the top of this one, or vice versa, not sure which way I did it now, and then went about getting the alignment perfect with the guards so that our bonnet line is straight, all our lengths between bolt holes. I actually took a lot of measurements of both of the guards initially before I went and cutting them up. Overall lengths, say from like the very tip here down to the tip there, and distance in between bolt holes and all that, so that I was certain that I wasn't changing the length of the guard even by a millimetre, that it was exactly the same as it should be from the factory. It all turned out pretty successful. So as I say, I sat them on there, I lined it all up, I worked out where I was going to do the join, I recut one of them to that length, sat it back over the top, and then just used a scriber, and then just scribed a line, and then cut the underneath guard, whichever way the lap went, the one that was on the bottom, scribed a line, cut it off, and then remounted it all back on the vehicle again and lined it all up again, just using the basic tools that I have here, just using things like vice grips and various, pairs of pliers and things like that. And then I went about TIG welding them both together. It's a little bit of a process, obviously, very low heat. You've got to be very careful that you don't end up, making a dog's breakfast out of it and putting too much heat into the panel. Doing butt joints is always a little bit tricky, but the end result is, something that looks factory from both sides, and it ends up really perfect. So this, as you can see, there's no body filler or anything in this. It's all steel at this stage. It's got a few little tiny deviations in it, but basically all it's going to take now is just a real thin skim of body filler over the top of that, and it'll be perfect. I actually had a mate come over yesterday, and you can see there's a little bit of a mark here. There was a slight bubble in it there from, when you're doing the welding on things like this, it's very hard to control things that want to happen. So you do your best, of course, but certain things are out of your control. And what happened here was I ended up with a slight bubble on this side of the weld. You see the weld runs down through there, and there was a very slight bubble in the steel on there that I just couldn't get back down and get right. So I had a mate come over who's a panel beater, and he did a few heat shrinks on there, and we got that down and got the steel all nice and tight, because it was a little bit oil canny, it wants to sort of push in and out real easy. So doing the heat shrinks, the purpose is not only to get the thing flat, but to remove any oil canning, like get a bit of tension in the panel back to how it should be. So that all went really well, and it's now really, really flat and in line. Like I say, little tiny dents, just from working it with hammers and stuff, but it's tight, it's beautifully in line and perfect. It lines up on the car perfectly, and it's basically a perfect front left-hand guard now. You probably noticed the colour differences here. What that's highlighting, this is where I've just been sanding with sort of sandpaper and stuff, to obviously do this repair and everything. And this darker grey on these sections of the guard, that's actually the factory galvanising. I've stripped this with paint stripper, so it hasn't had any abrasive or anything on it. So, and what that does is it leaves the factory galvanised coating intact, and it's quite a good thing, that they've actually done this. So it's it's not a bad thing. You can see there are a couple of spots under here where the galvanising that was just had a light under the paint. When I stripped it off here, there was just a really light bit of surface rust, and I'll show you an area down here. Alright, so this is the bottom of the guard, and you can see that the galvanised coating is just starting to give way in this area here, and there's a little tiny bit of surface rust. Now that's how it was when I stripped all the paint and stone guard off here. I haven't touched this at all, so I thought I'd just leave that there to show you guys, and you can see that that is actually the beginning of sort of rust starting to form. So what we'll do, we'll rub all that off, we'll give it a bit of a treatment, and then we'll hit the whole thing with a 2-pack epoxy primer over the whole guard, and it should be sweet. So it means now there's not a whole lot of work to do to it. This is going to be really quick and easy to skim coat that and get it all good. And then, as I say, epoxy primer, it's all done, can go back on the car. And I'll probably get this fairly good, but I'm not going to worry about guide coating it and blocking it down and everything. I will do all that when the time comes, and we'll do the whole car. So yeah, at this stage, that's what the plan is for this guard. Oh, I'll give you a look inside. So you can see this is where it was welded on the inside. It's a bit hard to tell, but it's welded down in there, so there's really no sign that this has actually been done. I'll epoxy prime the whole inside of this guard as well, and then probably spray some black over it, and it'll just be completely undetectable. Couple of little things I still have to do. just cleaning up this this edge where it bolts down to the guard. It's, you know, it's been flattened out by some of the bolts over the years, and it's a little bit ripply, so I'm just going to repair that and make all that look as good as new. And yeah, I'll get into it then, eh? So I'll give you a bit of a squeeze once she's all in epoxy primer, and back on the car it goes. And there we have it, guys. Sitting there in epoxy primer. So we've got 2 coats of epoxy primer on it on both sides. It turned out really, really good. Super happy with it. All I've got left to do now is I'm going to paint the back side of it with a 2-pack epoxy in a satin black over the top of the 2K primer. That'll give all the inside of it really, really good protection, because, you know, it's a guard, it's the wheels, and, you know, things get wet, even though there's guard liners and all that. Particularly on that bottom section of the guard, you want all of that sort of stuff coated up really well. The reason I did the inside in the 2-pack primer was when I was doing all the prep work on the outside, I noticed that it had lots of overspray and stuff over the original like factory black e-coat that was on there, but it had been painted over the top of dirt, so there was like dirt trapped underneath paint from where the guard's been repainted or the car's been repainted, bits and pieces over the years, you know. So basically I wanted to get all that crap off there, so I had a nice fresh clean finish on the inside of the guard, so that I knew that there was nothing nasty hiding under there that was going to cause problems later on. I'll lift it off, I'll give you a look at the inside. You can't tell that the 2 guards were joined together at all anymore. It's completely gone. So for all, you know, all intensive purposes, it's now just the 1 guard. And that's what the inside looks like. Absolutely perfect. No dramas at all. Like I say, you can't see that weld anymore. I just put the tiniest smear of filler over the weld, just so you couldn't sort of see any of the TIG marks in it. It all turned out absolutely great. This lower section here, like I was saying, I just wanted that to be absolutely 100% as far as coverage and protection goes, just because, you know, the bottom of the guard, that's where you're always going to have dramas with things. Fortunately, this thing is in perfect condition anyway, but I want to do everything in my power to keep it that way. Okie dokie. And yeah, that's where the weld was. So I'll just whip over that inside with some black, and it should be right to go back onto the car, where once I get all this major stuff finished, like I've mentioned before, the whole car will go in high fill primer, and we'll start addressing all those you know, little tiny bits and pieces on the car to get the finish on the thing absolutely perfect. Alright, I'll be back in a minute. And just like magic, folks, the black is all done, and the guard is now ready to go back on the car for the final priming and rub down with the rest of the car all in one go. So I guess that means it's time to move on to the next piece. Alright guys, that's the end of this video. So as always, thanks for stopping by the Aussie Shed. Always a bloody pleasure to have you here. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. As always, I'll bloody well see you on the next one. Cheers.